Hi, and welcome to the Perimenopause and Menopause Club. We are talking to Jane today, Jane Pangbourne, who is a perimenopause and menopause educator, and we are talking about the rather controversial, super interesting, all need some more knowledge about topic of hormonal replacement therapy and whether or not it is your friend. So Jane, tell us a little bit about you and take it away and school us.
Okay, hi, thank you for having me. My name's Jane Pangbourne. I am, as you say, Tracy, a menopause and HRT educator. I'm not a doctor, but all I talk about and all I research is menopause, perimenopause, post-menopause and HRT. So that is my world. And there are, I think, a few of the members from my HRT group in your group. So they'll already know that that's all I talk about in the group. I'm also the founder of Menopausal Not Mad, which is a support service offering help and support to ladies who need that extra bit of information from an individual perspective. And we have a website with lots of free resources. I'm also an affiliate of the British Menopause Society, and I'm coming to the end of a programme with the International Menopause Society as well. So just getting my finger in lots of different pies there. I help women to understand peri and post-menopause and how HRT can get them back to feeling like themselves again, because I think anybody that's ever realised menopause or even post-menopause knows that things change. The symptoms can make us feel like a completely different human being, and perhaps half a human being in many cases, and I certainly found that myself. So that's where I come from, so to speak. That's where my my focus is, and my reason for focusing on HRT is specifically around the facts and evidence that are wholly misrepresented in the media, and it's very frustrating to me because women are being left on a regular basis, and in my group we talk about it all the time, a regular basis being left with no hormonal support when really all they need is that additional estrogen or testosterone, which we were talking about earlier, to help them get back to being how they were before perimenopause hit. So I think, Tracy, your group will already know what perimenopause is because of what you do. So I didn't want to insult anybody's intelligence by telling them how to suck eggs, so to speak. Would that be correct in assuming?
Yes, but I think it's always good to just give a little bit of a recap so that people can work out where they are on the continuum, right? And how menopause is not just a day, and you don't just suddenly get symptoms, right, when your period starts.
Yeah, absolutely. So very briefly, because I know you probably cover this anyway, perimenopause is that time before your periods stop. And that can last it's when your estrogen is starting to decline, and that can last for up to 12 years. Menopause is actually the one day when your periods have been stopped for 12 months. So you haven't had a period for 12 whole months. That's the day that you're menopausal. And every day after that is post-menopause. So you have obviously pre-menopause, when your estrogen levels are perfectly normal and everything's ticking along and you feel like a normal human being to a degree. Then you have perimenopause, can last up to 12 years. Then you're menopausal when you've been period free for a year, and then it's post-menopause after that. Personally, I became perimenopausal at around 39, age 39. I'm 54 now. I didn't have a clue at age 39 that I was perimenopausal. I was just becoming particularly manic, and I had an assortment of symptoms. My most irritating ones, I suppose, the most debilitating for me were the buzzing all over my body, dizziness, brain fog, terribly low mood, and just anger. I was quite angry in my 40s. I'm less angry now because obviously I'm all balanced out with my HRT, but I was quite an angry 40-year-old, which wasn't great for my children as they were growing up, but they've got through it unscathed. And they're all grown adults now, and they left home as soon as they could because I think living with a perimenopausal mum was quite challenging for them. But it's all good. We're all balanced now. So my own experiences of perimenopause
were quite difficult, not in the least bit as difficult as some of the women I have to work with, who are just in such a state, and it saddens me when the doctors are not willing to help them. So we'll talk a little bit about that. My own experience of HRT was initially very poor. I obviously didn't necessarily know what I was asking for. I knew I wanted it. I'd researched it to a degree, but I wasn't sure of the level of detail that I know now. I was sent away and told I was not eligible for HRT because I was still having periods. That's incorrect. You are eligible for HRT if you're still having periods, because by its very nature, you are perimenopausal if you're still having periods. If you weren't having periods anymore, you would be postmenopausal. So we're trying to balance out those hormones that you're missing during that perimenopausal phase, and postmenopausal as well, but that's further down the line, obviously. So I was sent away with a flea in my ear, told to go away. I didn't need them. I was offered antidepressants, which most women are. I told them I didn't want those. I was offered the contraceptive pill, which I didn't want. There are also risks with the contraceptive pill, and we are going to address the elephant in the room with the whole breast cancer side of things. But the risks of the contraceptive pill are still higher than HRT in most cases. So that's an interesting, it interests me that doctors think it's okay to prescribe the contraceptive pill without a second thought, when in fact the risks of breast cancer are actually higher with the contraceptive pill in most cases. So all of those things were offered to me. Finally, I was given combined tablets, HRT tablets. They didn't agree with me. Many women do really, really well on them, but for me, I had a constant bleed and it wasn't right for me. Then I went on to patches. I have a bit of an eczema problem sometimes, and that brought my eczema back. So I changed from patches, and now I've been on estrogen gel for many years, and that's all good. So that's enough about me. That's kind of where I come from, and that's my story with regard to my experiences of HRT. But over the years, it just became so apparent that women were suffering unnecessarily, and many of the women that come to me are actually suicidal because of their depleted estrogen levels. In terms of the fact that HRT is viewed to be the bringer of death and doom, I know that it's controversial. I know that I'm not popular in a lot of circles, and many therapists think that what the sorts of things I talk about are harmful to women. That is not the case. I can't go through all the detail of that because there's so much evidence, but I'm going to touch on that a little bit, just so that hopefully it will raise some more questions, if nothing else, rather than send people away feeling as worried as they might be now about HRT. I don't know everything about everything to do with HRT. I know an awful lot about HRT preparations, about the risks and the benefits. Occasionally, I will have to go away and research something a little bit further, because I do have quite a lot of complex clients with complex issues as well. And it isn't a one size fits all with HRT. Everybody's an individual. So there's a framework, of course, of the safe way to use HRT, but everybody needs to be treated individually. So your doctor, if you are interested in HRT, your doctor should be treating you as that individual, who isn't just a name on a piece of paper that can be sent away with either antidepressants or patches or whatever. Does that all make sense so far, Tracy, or have I now started burbling on?
It does. It does make sense. Yes.
Okay.
I'm hear you say that it's very complex and that
Yes,
it's very individual.
it is indeed. So I have put a few notes up because, as you probably gathered, I do tend to just talk and talk and talk, and I will waffle on because I have a very cluttered brain. So if you do see me looking at my notes, it's just to remind me of things I want to cover rather than to miss them out. I did want to, as I've mentioned it already, I did want to just talk about very briefly about the stats with regard to breast cancer risks. And these are taken directly from the British Menopause Society, and are widely accepted as being up to date. There will be an update on these, I think, possibly this year, maybe next year, but they do update them as regularly as they can. So there's a nice little graphic on the British Menopause Society website, which explains what I'm going to say now. I've just put it into words. I'm not one for figures. I can never remember numbers, so I have written them down. For every 1,000 women that were tested, that were studied, 23 of those had contracted breast cancer, ended up with breast cancer for one reason or another. Okay. Now, the studies showed that there was an increased risk of 4 + 4 women if they were on a combined HRT. So 4 more than the 23 would get breast cancer if they were on a combined HRT. And I will explain the differences between the HRTs in a moment. Interestingly, which you may know, if the women were taking an estrogen only HRT, so if they'd had a hysterectomy and they didn't need the combined HRT, just the estrogen, then there were 4 fewer women contracted breast cancer. So there's a decrease in risk if they have estrogen only HRT. So estrogen already is not the devil it is meant made out to be. And in fact, quite often, a lot of people don't realize, quite often when doctors are treating breast cancer, when medical specialists are treating breast cancer, they will use estrogen therapy. So that's an interesting thing just to store in your mind if you're watching this, just to kind of mull that over. I'm not a scientist and I'm not a doctor, but those facts are those are based on long lasting studies, and they've been reviewed and they're continually reviewed, which is why these figures in the British Menopause Society are updated. There is, I've already mentioned that on the combined HRT, 4 more women are viewed to be likely to get breast cancer. That same figure applies to those on the combined contraceptive pill. So those women and doctors, anybody that considers HRT to be a really big breast cancer risk, need to also think the same about the combined contraceptive pill. And so many of the women I work with are put on the combined contraceptive pill, but told, no, you can't have HRT because it has a breast cancer risk. Well, the risk is the same in most cases. Obviously, individuals will vary. There is also a higher risk. So there are 5 more women that will be more likely to struggle with breast cancer, to suffer with breast cancer, if they drink 2 units of alcohol every day. That's just a small glass of wine. I don't need to know in the comments how many of us drink more than 2 units of alcohol a day. I did give up alcohol for nearly a year and a half, and that was actually a really, really good experience. It's a really good thing to try. If you do drink more than 2 units of alcohol a day, then that's a higher risk than if you take HRT. So that's a really good comparison. If you're a smoker, there are 3 women, 3 + 3 women that are likely to get breast cancer. So slightly lower than the figures I've given you, but it's still a risk. And the biggest risk, which because you're in the world of yoga and movement, Tracy, I'm sure you'll like this stat. The biggest risk for breast cancer is for those women who are not exercising and therefore have put on weight and have a BMI of perhaps 30 plus, around 30 and over. And that's not meant to be a fat shaming comment at all. It's just a fact that when we put on weight, we do have a higher risk of breast cancer. And it's actually 24 more women in those stats.
Wow.
So that's the big one.
Wow.
Hence, we need to exercise and look after ourselves. And, you know, I'm overweight at the moment. I've put on weight during lockdown, so I know, and I take HRT, so I need to be sensible. It's a really, really big part of what we need to do for ourselves. So I hope that puts that into focus somewhat. I find it slightly frustrating when doctors say to women who are really struggling, you can't have HRT because you're overweight, your blood pressure's too high. Well, you can. There are transdermal HRTs that you can have, but there's no point in saying to a woman who is at the end of her tether and desperately depressed and feeling awful, there's no point in saying to her, go and eat better, go and lose weight, go and do some exercise. That woman needs to feel better, and then she'll do those things. It's almost cart before horse to a degree.
Right.
So what I encourage women to do, and I always put in their reports to talk to their doctor about, is to say to their doctor, look, if we can get my hormones balanced, if I can feel better, I will walk, 10 miles a day. I'll do whatever's needed. But at the moment, I'm not even motivated to get my head off the pillow in the morning. And that's not me exaggerating. That's anybody in your group who symptoms will completely understand that and understand how that feels. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I mean, I have just started in the past couple of weeks with the most horrific night sweats. I'm sure other people in the group who have them will know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They just come out of nowhere. Well, not really come out of nowhere. I'm under a lot of stress at the moment and working crazy work days. So maybe that has something to do with it. But I can tell you the last thing I feel like doing after having a completely disturbed night's sleep and waking up just finished in the morning is doing any kind of exercise.
And I understand that completely. And so it would just seem, a nonsense for me to then say to you, well, for goodness sake, Tracy, just do the exercise. Don't worry about how you feel. It's understandable that if you have night sweats, it keeps you awake. Many women are drenched with the night sweats, and they're having to change the bedding in the middle of the night. Women who are struggling with vaginal atrophy, they're up in the night 3 or 4 times going for a wee, because going to the toilet because their bladder is irritated. Nobody ever tells a woman that it's so easy to sort that. Even women with breast cancer can take the vaginal estrogen. In the majority of cases, can use the vaginal estrogen, but doctors still think of that in many cases. Many situations they will say, no, that's too much estrogen. It's excuse me, it's the lowest level of estrogen, but it's just enough to get that bladder back into its normal state so that you're not waking up all night.
Right.
Anyway.
And of course, if you have vaginal atrophy or bladder issues going on, the last thing you want to do is exercise. You don't want to be leaking in yoga class.
No, I had a client yesterday who said, all I want, Jane, is I want to, exactly what you've just said. She said, I want to be able to start yoga again and take my dog for a walk without feeling like I'm going to pee myself. Yeah. And it's not much to ask, is it, Tracy? Really, it's not much to ask that you don't pee yourself on a regular basis. So yeah, those are my frustrations with that. I did want to, I've just seen my note to myself here. I did want to now address some of the more challenging elements of the whole HRT conversation. And then I'll talk a little bit, if that's okay, about the types of HRT that are available. It's a big old subject and it's very individual, but I can give you an overview if you're happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's okay.
So sorry, I was just checking the question.
That's fine. So I wanted to just say, in terms of doing things the natural way and doing things with HRT, that's always the question that comes up. Women often come to me or come into the group, or I see them on other groups saying, oh no, I just got on with it and I suffered and I got through it and I'm fine now. Or I'm really suffering, but I really want to do it the natural way. I don't want to give in to HRT. And it breaks my heart that when women say that, because it's absolutely not giving in. You would never say to somebody, I mean, I have an underactive thyroid. Nobody would ever dare say to me, well, Jane, why have you given in? Why are you taking thyroxine? That's a bit ridiculous. You can't be taking that all your life. Well, actually, it keeps me alive. Thanks very much. And it keeps me sane, because underactive thyroids, as you probably know, cause all sorts of other issues. And it's the same with somebody on insulin who's diabetic. You would never say to them, well, you've given in to your deficiency in insulin. What's the matter with you? And all we're doing, and we're so privileged to be able to do this with science nowadays, is we're replacing estrogen and a hormone deficiency we weren't meant to live this long. We were meant to be born, have babies, and be dead by the time we were 40, 44. So we didn't really have perimenopause in the old days, pre-1800s. We just didn't have it. And we certainly didn't have post-menopause. Women just didn't live long enough to experience it. Now we could live half our lives without any estrogen. Oh my God, the impact of that, Tracy, it just frightens the bejesus out of me. To live without estrogen, it has such a massive impact on our system. There are, you'll know anyway, but there are over 40 symptoms. And some of those symptoms, they don't just stop when your periods stop. They carry on. I have women in their 70s who are still having hot sweats. They're still having hot flushes. They're still anxious. They still have a vagina that's like the desert. And they think, oh, that's okay. It's okay. It's just me getting older. No, you can get older. Of course, we're going to get older and we're going to get a bit saggy and baggy and more wrinkly. And that's fine. That's accepted. But we don't have to put up with these symptoms of low estrogen. We can keep that estrogen level very safely at a decent level to keep our symptoms at bay and live a very long and happy life. On the note of symptoms, it's not just about symptoms. It's also about the long-term health benefits. So the long-term health benefits, sorry, I'll reverse that. The negative side, the risks of not having estrogen in our systems post-menopause, and actually perimenopause as well. If you're young and you go into early menopause, which is called premature ovarian insufficiency, it's really important that we replace that estrogen to the level where our symptoms are managed and we're feeling normal again. If we don't, and I know a lot of you will know this, we are at high risk of osteoporosis, heart disease, which we've talked about, Tracy, dementia, depression, diabetes. The dementia thing is a relatively new one in the sense that the knowledge is new, in the sense that they used to think women had dementia more than men because we live a bit longer than men, but they've now clearly identified that it's linked to the low estrogen levels that we have. Now, if we don't, even if you don't have a single symptom and you sail through and everything's all fine, your periods stop exactly on time, and you just carry on life as normal, you are still at higher risk of osteoporosis, heart disease, and all the other things I've just mentioned. And I do have an example of this. I have a friend whose mum is very slim, very fit. She's very busy. She's in her mid-70s. I think she was in her early 70s at the time. Looks great. She's never taken HRT, sailed through menopause, no probs, all good. And only, I think it was last year, she's still alive, but she had a heart attack. And the doctors very clearly said to her, yeah, that was probably caused by low estrogen. As I've said to you before, Tracy, you can't definitely say, but he said it's probably linked to the fact that you've got low estrogen. We'll never know if that's the case, but that's just an example of the impact of not having enough estrogen in our systems. And I think as I said to you before, I'm not really a figures person, but I believe the figure is that as women, we are 7 times more likely to die of heart disease than we are of breast cancer. So I hope that part of what I have to say puts it into a little bit more balance, and it puts it into a bit more HRT friendly zone before I talk to you about breast cancer, which is always an interesting. There'll be plenty of people who are rolling their eyes at me talking and possibly have even switched me off by now, but I'm used to that. It's okay. Any questions from you, Tracy, before I carry on?
No, please carry on. That statistic about about having a great propensity for women to die from heart disease and breast cancer, I think is really important for people to know, because it was certainly not something that was on my radar at all.
And it wasn't on mine either. It took me a long time to really get to understand how important it is. And so many more women die of heart disease. And that's not, I'm not trying to scare anybody and say, if you don't take HRT, you'll die of heart disease, you'll have osteoporosis and all those other things. But it does put you at a considerably higher risk. And that quality of life, when I think back to my grandmother, for example, she didn't take HRT. Of course she didn't. This was many years ago. She was, again, very fit. And a lot of people with women with grandmothers will think the same. Very fit, bouncing around all over the place. But as soon as she hit menopause, I now look back retrospectively and I can see she became a little hunched up old lady. She was still the same person, but she was this hunched up old lady that became very anxious and her mood was very low. I wish I'd known then what I know now, because I would have been kinder to her. I'm not sure any of us in the family, when she was still alive, understood what she'd been going through. And she certainly didn't know it. But now, of course, we know that if somebody doesn't take HRT and they start to struggle with bone problems, joint pain, a lot of women break bones more easily. Even younger women who are going through perimenopause can quite often say, oh, I broke my ankle. I don't know how I broke it. That's a clear sign that there's some density changes going on. So it's not meant to frighten people. It's just a fact that you are more at risk. It's as simple as that. And if you want to carry on without HRT, of course, that's your choice. And it's perfectly understandable that you need to make a choice that's right for you. And I would never want anybody to take HRT if they were really anxious about it. I would want you to feel comfortable with it before you did. But you need to understand what the impact is of taking it or not taking it, so that you've got that balance, which we talked about earlier, Tracy.
Yes, I think having the knowledge on either side is so important, because
Absolutely.
I do see in the various groups and clients that I speak to that there are one group of people where the doctor is saying, yes, here, take the HRT, and the person doesn't really have an understanding of what the risks are, and so they can't make an informed decision.
No.
And then there's the other side where people are asking for HRT and the doctor won't give it to them.
Yeah, a lot. That happens probably, I don't know how many times a day, hundreds of times a day that happens. And in my group, I probably see half of those talking about it in the group and private messaging me. And that one of the main things I do, which wasn't actually what I set out to do, but one of the main things I do is to arm women with the knowledge so that and lay out their individual needs so they can go to the doctor and say, I'm not in this way, of course, but I know more than you. I know this now. I've made the decision to take HRT. So please, please, will you give it to me?
And is that because most doctors are not up to date or
100%.
Don't have the specialist knowledge?
Yes, both of those things are true. Unfortunately, doctors, and there is a lobby to change this, I know, but doctors are not trained on menopause or HRT in medical school. So I'm not blaming doctors, and they don't have time to specialize. GPs don't have time to specialize. I completely understand that. My frustration, and the frustration of many of people out there who are shouting as loudly as I am, is that it's so slow to make that change. So your doctor's opinion of HRT is actually irrelevant. My opinion of HRT is irrelevant. It's about the facts. So your doctor, if you say, I'd really like to try HRT, this is why, and these are my symptoms, and I know this and I know this, your doctor should be listening to you and saying, okay, fair enough. I can see that you've researched well. I can see that this is based on fact, this is based on evidence. Let's give that a go. And then see how you get on with it. And if the woman starts to feel better, knowing the small risks, and they are really small, then that's her choice. It's not really the doctor's choice to make that decision for them. The doctor is there to give the balance of, well, okay, yes, this will help you with X symptoms, but these are the risks. And are you happy with those? Fine. What's actually happening in a lot of cases is they're saying, well, these are the risks. I'm not going to even consider it. that's not what the doctor-patient relationship is about. And there's some amazing doctors out there who would do exactly the right thing. So I'm certainly not slating doctors, but the doctors who don't understand HRT and don't understand how the menopause affects women just won't even consider it, and therefore women are being left feeling small, they're being left feeling more depressed. Women are in tears when they leave the office because they've been made to feel insignificant. That's not what should happen. This is about having a conversation, so that you both know what's best for you. So with regard to breast cancer, I have got some notes up here because I like I said, I've got a cluttered brain, but just to remind me, the main reasons we have I've just realised the lighting's very odd. It's because it's evening here now, so I'm sorry if it's gone a little bit dark here. The main reasons that we have the negativity around HRT essentially surrounds the study in 2002 from the Women's Health Institute, where the figures, the study was warped and flawed, but the figures were then taken by the media before they'd been checked. And I can't remember the exact headline, but it was something like HRT causes breast cancer, something like that. And that was the beginning of a snowball effect of everybody being taken off their HRT, women being left with nothing. And the whole conversation around replacing hormones became a very, very negative thing, having previously been a relatively positive conversation because it was a great thing. We can replace hormones, fantastic, women starting to feel better. But since then, for the last 19, 20 years, that conversation hasn't really changed. And we are being told, and I know women my age and younger than me, and women my mother's age, are all being told fake facts and fake news about HRT, not based on current HRT, which is considerably safer than it was when it was first developed in the 50s and 60s, which was made, and it is still available now, but it was made from horse's pee. That brand is still available now, that type is still available, but there are much, much safer options and much better options available. But it's being fed down the generations. Still, hopefully we'll be the last generation that will have to put up with this, but we're being fed this fake information, which is frightening everybody into believing HRT is the bringer of death and doom. So that study that I referred to has been identified as being very flawed. Obviously, many studies since then, which would be too much to go into, but the women involved in the trial, it was that particular trial, there was a very particular section of women involved in the trial, which isn't a broad spectrum of the women who would be taking HRT. So they were all in their 60s, and there was nobody in their 30s, 40s, or 50s. They were all taking the synthetic version of HRT, an older version of HRT. So there's no real comparison with what's going on today. So that study is why we are in the situation we're in. So any questions on that, Tracy?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. So the type of HRT, sorry, before I talk about that, I'll just reminded myself because I always forget. The combined HRTs, so the ones with estrogen and progesterone, which we need if we still have a uterus, because our uterus needs protecting from, the lining needs protecting from over thickening. If you just bring in estrogen only, it over thickens the lining of your uterus. And many women in the early days of HRT were given estrogen only, without progesterone being added, and they were dying from endometrial cancer because estrogen only was putting them at higher risk of endometrial cancer. And that doesn't mean that HRT is going to give you endometrial cancer, but what we do is, if you still have your uterus, we introduce the estrogen to get you balanced, so you're feeling like a normal human being again. The progesterone comes in to then stop the over thickening of the lining of the uterus. So you've got that balance then. So you've got the estrogen thickening the lining of the uterus and the progesterone thins it down again. So you've got a nice balance. So if, for example, a woman was on HRT, combined HRT, and she'd been period free for a year or so, and then she started to bleed, having been period free for that long, that would be a sign that possibly there was some thickening of the lining of the uterus. And so she would definitely want to go for a scan just to check that. And I've recently had this happen myself. Went for a scan, all was good. I had a polyp, as it happens, had to have that scraped out, which is all lovely and gross. But there were no issues. But it was important to have that checked. So that sort of thing can be monitored. But when you have the estrogen and progesterone together, the newer progesterones are body identical, made from the yam plant, really safe. The estrogens, body identical, really, really safe. There is no real higher risk of breast cancer with those. If you bring in a synthetic progesterone, like, for example, the Mirena coil, that's an example of a synthetic progesterone, or in the patches, there is a synthetic progesterone with the combined patches, there is a very slightly increased risk, but it is really small in terms of compared to the lifestyle factors that we mentioned earlier. Does that make sense? Have I waffled on a bit there? Because I kind of hopped around a little bit there.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Okay. So the most important thing is that I'll just go on to the types of HRTs as we're talking about progesterone anyway, is to get the right type of HRT for that particular woman. So for example, there is an increased risk of blood clots, a small increased risk, the same as the contraceptive pill, which again, they don't mention, with the tablet form of combined HRT. Femistone would be a good example of that. That doesn't mean it's a terrible HRT and you should never take it, because many women fare absolutely fabulously on these tablets and they wouldn't be without them. But if a woman came to me asking about HRT and she was very overweight or she had blood pressure issues, a lot of doctors will say, oh no, you're overweight, blood pressure, no HRT. She can have HRT, but she just shouldn't really go for the tablet form because there is this slight increased risk of blood clots. But I'll be damn sure that that doctor would give that lady the contraceptive pill. And that's the sort of mismatch of information that's frustrating. What we tend to do I tend to use it as a first port of call anyway, but we tend to do with women who may have high blood pressure or slightly overweight, I would be saying to them, we'll definitely look at a transdermal version of HRT. So that would be a gel, a patch, or the spray. There's a newer one, not that new actually, but new-ish, called Lenzetto. It's in the UK, it's only available privately in general, but I'm not sure in Canada whether it's readily available or not, but it exists and it's been around a year or two now. When you use the transdermal gels or sprays or patches, you're cutting out the rest of your system in the sense that it's not going through your liver, you're not putting anything else into your gut. So it's much kinder on your system. Therefore, if you were very overweight, it's not a problem having a transdermal patch or a gel or a spray. It's not putting you at any higher risk of blood clots than anybody else. So a lot of doctors don't realise that, and a lot of doctors don't think that the transdermal body identical versions are available unless it's private care. That's not true. They are available. And I think it's the same in Canada. I'm not 100% sure. I know a little bit more about the US rather than Canada, but I do have some Canadian members in my own group, and they seem to be doing the same as the rest of us. So I'm sure they'll comment, but it seems to be similar there. So what was my other note? Sorry. We've talked about the risk factors. I did make a note to remind myself. I'd said here, there has never been a study that shows women who take HRT have a higher risk of death from breast cancer. So I'll just say that again. There has never been a study to show that women who take HRT have a higher risk of death from breast cancer. So that's quite important. So you may say, oh, well, there is a small risk of me contracting breast cancer. That risk is small, depending on your lifestyle factors. But the number of women who actually die as a result of breast cancer when they take HRT is not proven at all. There's no study that's proven that, which again is quite interesting when you consider the hype around what is obviously a terrible disease. I'm not belittling breast cancer. It's a terrible disease, but we're much more likely to survive it these days. And HRT isn't the biggest reason or factor for women contracting breast cancer. Does that make sense? Oh, never quite sure. So the other point I wanted to make was, for the majority of women starting HRT under the age of 60, so the risks slightly increase when you're over 60, but not a lot. The benefits of HRT far outweigh any of the risks. And it's particularly important when you're looking at women who are, as I mentioned earlier, about premature ovarian insufficiency. So if you have a woman who maybe became prematurely menopausal when she was a young girl, that happens, or in her 20s or maybe 30s, that woman is going to be without her estrogen, which we've talked about in terms of its protective elements, for so much longer than somebody that becomes menopausal in her 50s or perimenopausal in her late 40s. So it's really important from a bone health and brain health and heart health perspective, regardless of symptoms, although they are a massive factor, of course, that we protect those elements of her health as soon as possible. It's all very well doctors saying, well, you're only 32, so you're much too young to start any HRT because I'll have to take it off you after 5 years or 10 years. That's not true either. So I'm not going to put you on it until you're 45 or 50. During that time, that 32-year-old has a number of years where her body is under the strain of not having the hormones that she needs to protect her and to make her feel well. And as we touched on already, the estrogen receptors in our body affect everything. They affect our brain, they affect our bladder, they affect our digestion, which is a big one. Bloating and digestion slowing down is a big element of low estrogen. They affect the vaginal health, they affect your libido, all these things, as well as anxiety and mood, etc. All of those things that you know about are quite often in a perimenopausal woman down to the low estrogen. Yes, of course, she may also have clinical depression for other reasons. I'm not dismissing that sometimes antidepressants are important. And I do have a number of ladies in my own group who run low-level antidepressants alongside their HRT because they're depressed for other reasons, and that's nothing to do with hormones. I'm not dismissing that, but what I am saying is that antidepressants are not the first port of call. The combined contraceptive pill is not the first port of call. It needs to be a conversation about, is it your hormones? Okay, let's talk about what you want to do about that. And let's talk about the small risks of HRT. What sort of HRT would you like? And what benefits are you going to get from that? Because women are just totally uninformed about that.
Can I just say something there? You said, yes, let's talk about where, if it's your hormones. Is it your hormones? I see, yes, so many people going through perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms. Well, perimenopausal, right? Because when you're menopausal, you can at least say, yeah, your healthcare provider, well, I don't have periods, therefore, yes, ergo, I'm menopausal. But before that, a lot of people have trouble convincing their healthcare provider that there's actually something hormonal going on. So maybe you can talk a bit about that.
Of course. It does vary according to the healthcare provider, of course. But certainly in the UK, our clinicians are clearly directed. They don't necessarily always do this, but they are clearly directed to go to diagnose menopause based on symptoms. So if the woman's still having periods, perimenopause, if she's having the symptoms, a number of the symptoms that we've talked about, and they're quite obviously based on a cycle as well, and perhaps her periods are erratic. They don't have to be erratic. She doesn't have to be having hot flushes. But if she's got a number of those symptoms, if she's under 45, a blood test is worthwhile. But not just one blood test. We need 2 blood tests at least 6 weeks apart. So, sorry, 2 blood tests at least 6 weeks apart, not at least 6 weeks apart. So that you can see if there've been any fluctuations. If she's over 45 or over, then we just go by symptoms alone. We don't need a blood test. We can just look at the symptoms, and we can be reasonably sure if she's got those symptoms, a number of the symptoms, that at age 45, many doctors think that's too young, but at age 45 and above, she is very likely to be perimenopausal. The blood tests for the under 45s need to show that fluctuation, but symptoms are also part of that conversation. They're a big part of that conversation. What a lot of doctors will do, certainly in the UK, if they don't understand that, is they will take one blood test and then say, oh, it's normal. It's almost like they're setting you up for failure, because one blood test just tells us what your hormones are doing on that day. It doesn't tell us if there's any fluctuations. So if somebody just takes, in fact, I had 2 clients on the same day, which demonstrated this beautifully. They both had single blood tests, and I'd said, oh God, we need 2 blood tests so that they can actually see the fluctuations. One lady was told, yes, you can have HRT because hers showed some dips in her hormone levels. The other lady was having a good day for her hormones, and so she was told, no, you can't have HRT. The first lady was just very lucky that her hormones were dipping on that day, but the other lady was unlucky because she wasn't able to demonstrate her fluctuations. But the symptom element of it is really important, more important than anything else. And convincing your clinician is a challenge. But if you can go armed with the knowledge that you have this many symptoms and this is what's happening with your periods, if that's relevant, then they should be listening to you and saying, okay, you're over 45, or whatever age you are, we hear you, and therefore we're prepared to try HRT. The age element is a big problem, because a lot of doctors will say, oh no, you're under 50, you can't possibly be perimenopausal. Well, if we look at the fact that a fully postmenopausal woman, the average age of a postmenopausal woman is around about 51, 52 years of age. Perimenopause can last 12 years, and it certainly did for me. I was pretty textbook. So simple maths would say that anybody in their 40s and probably late 30s is absolutely textbook age for being perimenopausal at one level or another. So just saying to a woman, oh no, you're 42, you're way too young, you can't possibly be perimenopausal, is very dismissive and not accepting of the facts. The facts are, of course, she could be perimenopausal. She may be early, but she's definitely perimenopausal, or possibly perimenopausal at that age. Does that answer part of that question?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it does. Thank you.
I know we haven't got too much time, but I just want to talk a little bit, if that's okay, about the types of we've touched on it anyway, but the types of HRT with the tablets, the gel, and the spray and the patches. A lot of women struggle to know what's best for them, because their doctor, if they agree to HRT, will say, will you go away and decide what you want to have? And nobody has a clue then what to ask for. So as I said before, the tablets do have that slightly increased risk of blood clots. Some women are absolutely fine with that slight risk, and they say, I'm much happier just taking a tablet. That suits my lifestyle. I'm all good with that. That's the route they go down, and there's nothing wrong with that. And many women do really well on the tablets. If they want to go more down the transdermal route, then you've got the patches. So you have as a starting point. So the patches are there are estrogen only patches, which you can have with a separate progesterone, and there are also low dose combined patches that have the progesterone included in the packet. And those are for women still having, generally women still having periods have one called Everel Sequi, which I think you still get in Canada as well. So the only difference, the main difference with that progesterone in that patch, which I think I mentioned earlier, is that progesterone is a synthetic progesterone. Doesn't mean it's not a good HRT, because it really is, but it's not the body identical progesterone. So I'd always like to make sure women know that they're comfortable with it. If a woman said, if after we chatted, a woman indicated some real progesterone sensitivity, so she'd really struggled with progesterone as she was growing up, for example, with the contraceptive pill, I might say, let's perhaps not do the synthetic one then, and maybe not have a Mirena coil, which is another synthetic progesterone. It's very low level progesterone and it's still really good. But if she's really sensitive to it, I might say, okay, let's not go down that route, just in case it, it doesn't agree with you. But the so in that case, you'd have the estrogen only patch, or you could have the estrogen only gel, which I've got my little pal here, which is my little estrogel. This is one version of the estrogen gel. So that's, you can see that. So that's the estrogel. In the US and I think Canada as well, you can get estrogel, but the more common brands are the Sandrina, which is another one very similar to this gel, but it's in a sachet, in a little pouch. And the even more common one is one called Divigel, which again is exactly the same. It's just a US version of the same sort of thing. So there are different versions of estrogen gel, but like the patch, they're transdermal, go through the skin. You'd put the gel on every day, whereas the patch you change twice a week. And the add-on progesterone for that would either be the Mirena coil, which I've referred to, or you would bring in our little friend here. So there are slightly different versions of this, but the most known one is the Utrogestan, or I don't have an example of Utrogestan of the other tablets, but there's one again in the US and Canada that's probably more available called Prometrium. And Prometrium and Utrogestan are both body identical, and for all the reasons that we've said, they would probably be my first choice. You would take them at different times depending on whether you were still having periods or not, but that's obviously, you don't need to know all those details now. And then there's also the spray, which is the same as the gel in the sense you put it on every day, but it's stronger, so you put less on, and it's not quite as messy as the gel. So a lot of women like the spray. And I think I've talked myself out now. I have lots more I could say, but then we're kind of into another hour of me rambling on. So does that cover what you wanted me to cover?
Yes. I just wanted to ask one more thing in terms of the urogenital symptoms.
Yes.
Would there be different types of products for that?
Yes, there are. So I'm just trying to think what's available in the States and Canada. The one I recommend generally is the Vestin Cream. I don't have an example of that. I do have one downstairs. Sorry, I forgot to bring that up. But the Vestin Cream is good for internal use and external use if there were any issues with dryness and soreness on the outside area. It's really good for internal use because you get a lovely long applicator with it. And when you put it high up into the vagina, it nourishes the neck of the womb, which has a lot of estrogen receptors. And that stops that bladder urgency that you get you can get when you're low in estrogen. So it has a kind of a double whammy effect. The same applies to Vagifem pessaries. They are obviously only able to be used in the internal area because they're pessaries, and then you could have the cream as well as those if you like them. So Vagifem, Ovestin. There's another one called Estriol cream, which is slightly weaker, and therefore you use more of it. So it's not that I don't recommend it, it's just there's quite a lot of cream. So I always say, well, let's go for the Ovestin because you don't need quite as much because it's stronger. Otherwise it gets quite busy up there with lots of cream and pessaries. And there is another one which is very mild, which I don't tend to recommend just because it's so mild, which is called Blissel. It is a very, very low level estrogen cream. 0.005%, I think. So it's still okay. But it's not strong enough in my experience to do the job. And there is another one in Spain called Estrogen, I think. I can't remember exactly, but I think that's the name of that one. So there are a number of brands, but vaginal estrogen comes in, different brands. So they're probably a lot more than I even know.
Thank you. And I think that's very important for people to know that there are topical options for
100%.
what's going on down there, right?
Absolutely. And they're very safe options.
Yes.
All of them.
Yeah. So this has all been very, very insightful.
Good.
To summarize, what I hear you say is that this is very complicated and then lots of options.
Yeah.
And more than likely, your GP won't be able to help you. So what's a girl to do and what do you offer?
Okay, so your GP can help you, and I'm not here to tell you that your GP is awful and won't help you. Your GP may choose not to help you, but you can access help. I have a particular role in women's lives. So I do work with a doctor, so women's healthcare specialist. She and I work together. If somebody wants to see a private doctor as well, then they can do that. But I work with women on a one-to-one basis. I spend a lot of time in my group and in other groups helping for free, and I'm on social media all the time doing my thing. But if anybody wants individual help, I do one-to-one consultations. There's literally never any pressure to book in with me. But if somebody wants individual help, then I do 20-minute sessions, 30-minute sessions, 40-minute sessions, and hour-long sessions. And the longer sessions come with a full follow-up report, which is often very useful for them to talk through with their GP. Most GPs will take my report and say, thank you very much, that's really useful, thanks for the information, and they'll prescribe. Some GPs will say, absolutely not, it hasn't changed my mind at all. I obviously can't change that, but at least then what happens is that the woman is more informed and empowered to perhaps move on to another GP that will help. So my role is to inform, empower, and to support through those initial adjustment periods, where the first few months can be difficult when women are saying, well, is this normal? Should I bleed then? How much of this should I take? So that's where the group is really helpful, in the sense they hop in and out and I'll give answers. If I know what's going on, I can give a quick answer. If it's something more detailed, then we'll just have another consultation. But hand on heart, there's never any pressure to book. I'm just really happy to help in whatever way I can.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
You're super welcome.
This has been incredibly enlightening.
Good.
And I actually have a telephone conversation booked with my GP for this afternoon. So I think I have some good questions to ask him.
Good timing.
So thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. And if you could perhaps just include your links below. What is your website and what is the name of your group?
Okay, so I'll pop the links on afterwards, but my website is, as you can see from my t-shirt, menopausalnotmad.co.uk. There's lots of free stuff on there, and obviously you can book if you want to, but there's no pressure. And my group is the HRT and Hormone Help Group. So please join away, and you can say where you found me and I'll just accept you straight away.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I see there are some questions.
I'll hop in and answer those after, if that's okay, Tracy.
Amazing. Thank you. And can people ask questions on the replay as well?
Yeah, of course. I'll hop in. I'll put notifications on and I'll answer as quickly as I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming to be with us in the club. And hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, see you soon.
Okay. Bye.